knowing your win has so much to do with investing. If you don't know your win, more is the answer. So in investing, more means I'll just invest into more things. Maybe it's oil and gas. Maybe it's more stocks. Maybe it's going to be some tax liens. Maybe it's whatever comes up that you can allocate money to, because it's simply about growth. And sometimes that growth skips all of the personal growth that you would have because you're just handing it over, hoping for the best. What's your win? Do you know? Well, if you do know, life gets a whole lot better. So we figured we need to bring in a 26-year-old expert to talk about this.
With all of his life experience behind him.
The worst part about this man is that people refer to him as a young version of me. So I feel bad for him. Like, first off, he's the only person with a beard that looks like a baby. It's pretty amazing, you know? He's like, this will give me credibility. No, why does that baby have a beard? I don't understand. He wrote The And Asset, A-N-D, The And Asset. I've had multiple people over multiple years say, hey, do you know who Caleb Williams is? Like, yeah, man, I know him. We're friends. But he's made a splash in the financial world at a very young age. And we're looking to do more things together. And he's here at this cabin because we've been hanging out all week. And so he showed me a video that he did on Instagram. It's so aligned with this topic. And so Corey and I said, hey, you jump up here and let's put you on video. So good to have you here, man.
Dude, it's good. It's good to be here.
Bringing the average age down here.
I'm bringing the average age, hoping to bring the looks up a little bit.
No, just the age thing.
Yeah. See, the thing is, as you get older as a man, it's a distinguished look, the crow's feet by our eyes.
Like, sure, you have the whole Zac Efron thing going for you right now, but it'll catch up with you.
Zac Efron, if he shed the muscles.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Like,
I got nothing.
before he lifted a weight.
And
What's
that's
your
the
win?
episode, everyone.
What's your win?
Thank you
Not
for watching.
being on this podcast
Yes.
with Garrett. That's my win.
What does being self-aware mean to you? And then how can someone listening to this or watching this become more self-aware?
I think the ability to become self-aware, what that means to me is the ability to filter out the external influences. And for such a big part of my life, I thrived off the community I was in, the perception that I had, people's perception of my success. These were all things that validated my worth. But the reality is on the inside, I was the 13-year-old kid that nobody wanted. And it didn't matter what I accomplished. That was my truth, and that was my reality. And you and I were talking about this earlier this week. You know, there's the concept of you know what you know what you don't know, but you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that's normally 80 to 85% of someone's reality is you don't know what you don't know. And so there was such a large part of my life that no matter the success that came, no matter the accomplishment, it was always empty. And it was because I was unaware of how I viewed myself. And so when I started to look internally, and that was forced upon me through a variety of different circumstances, hollow victories, empty trophies, 2 depressions, anxiety attacks. That made me sit down and really ask what is going on? Mm-hmm. On the surface, I should have happiness. I should have, I've accomplished what most people are still trying to get to. So why is this empty? Right. And it was because I was empty on the inside. And so when I started to go back and do some work, and that was through a variety of different modalities, I've done traditional therapy, I've done talk therapy, I've done journaling, I've done psychedelics. It was only really until I started to kind of crack the nut and see what was inside that I started to kind of shed that view of myself and become more self-aware and how I show up in certain circumstances and how certain circumstances trigger a certain behavior or pattern within me.
I love how you say being aware of the influences. Is that what you said? Mm-hmm. Because it's so true. Is like if you can become aware of what influences you, that's it.
Yeah.
And so
you build a fortress around yourself. And I don't mean to keep others out, but to stop those influences from leaching in so you can be within purity of yourself.
Is there a question or two that someone can ask themselves or the people that are closest to them to help them understand what influences them?
That is a good question within itself. A question for a question. I don't know if I actually have the answer for that. I'm going to put some thought into that.
I mean, what are
Do
they?
you have a book
What are
on
they
that, Garrett?
watching? What are they reading? Yeah.
Don't
Hey,
encourage.
hey. I will soon.
Okay. All right. I'm just curious.
I think, it's pretty easy to understand when someone's watching CNN, MSNBC all day, or if someone's watching Fox News all day. It's really easy to see the dividing lines, what the hot button issues are going to be, and what their belief is. Also, you get on social media, and it's amazing if you go look at someone else's social media that thinks a lot different than you, and look at their news feed, and then look at your news feed and watch how different that is, and how much influence happens there. Even watching that documentary on Netflix about social media, which one? What's that?
Social Dilemma.
Yeah, Social Dilemma.
Yep.
That'll show you influence, and I mean, it's something that my wife got NLP certified, neuro-linguistics programming, and man, you just start to see like all of the verbiage. And one of the things that Corey said, he goes, words cast spells. Hey, pardon the interruption, but I've got a gift for you. Actually, two. Killing Sacred Cows, my New York Times bestseller, hit #1 on Wall Street Journal, and my most popular book of all time, What Would the Rockefellers Do? Killing Sacred Cows is like a permission slip to have more success and avoid the missteps and myths around finance. And What Would the Rockefellers Do is taking these kind of big billionaire technology and ideas and bringing them to the masses. So it's a step-by-step financial system where you can start with as little as I did when I was 19 at $50 a month. So if you go to GarrettGunderson.com/offer, give me your email address, and I'll just shoot those books right over to you so you can enjoy and learn at your own pace. And so when you listen to music, and you watch movies, we have the four personas: the miser that plays a game called preservation, the conservative that plays a game called accumulation, and that's not a political affiliation, the striver that plays a game called status, and the high roller that plays a game called opportunity. So my kids know what those are. So we watch Parks and Rec, and they're like, oh, the character that Aziz plays is the high roller. The character that, Leslie plays is the striver. The character that Ben plays is the conservative, and the character that Ron plays, that's the miser. So we can just see it, and then you see people look to identify themselves in these characters, and then you look at everything that comes from consumption and purchases, and what we're told, from fashion to society to magazine covers to the programs that we listen to and the advertising. There's so much influence, even who you're around on a regular basis, from your family to who you're married. Carrie and I have a lot of similar beliefs. We've kind of worked our way through to get to this point, but we think differently than other married couples because we've had different conversations and we have different travel. I'm telling you, if someone travels abroad, it expands their mind like no other. My kids were afraid when we went to Italy, then the world became small.
Can we send him to some other places?
Did you also know that I'm an Italian citizen? I mean, does that make me sound cool or like an asshole?
No, but I'm in complete alignment. For me, my greatest teacher was expanding kind of like my awareness. And so you start to see a variety of different ways of life in different countries, and that gives perspective.
Totally. And I went to Korea and taught English for 3 months when I was 18 years old. I went there because I thought I was going to model. I taught English. Who needs a 6'3" white dude in Korea? What was I going to model? Hey, here's clothes that don't fit you. Great, but that's how naive I was. So I go there and I go to this movie, and the beginning, trailers, they have like a public service announcement. So it's in Korean, but they show the English subtitles, and it's about this couple that gets married. And the woman's staying at home, but she's running her air conditioner. And I'm there during the monsoon season, and so they were having power outages and things like that. So they're talking about her getting aircon disease, is how it translated. And so when she stopped running her air conditioner during the hottest time of the day and used a fan, just a little tiny fan, she was sweating, but she was super happy and no longer sick. And I'm 18 years old, and it was the first time I thought, wait, this is propaganda. And I'm here in Korea, and I can see it because I live in America, but how much of America was I indoctrinated with in propaganda? So immediately, here were my insights. I'm like, oh, I grew up in a rural town that told me America was the only free country. I heard that over and over. So I believed other countries had curfews and martial law. And all of a sudden I go to Korea, I'm like, wait, I go out anytime I want. They're just as free as I am. And yet I believed I was more free. Second, and this is a little harder to admit, I thought because I was American that I was favored. I live in Utah, where the Mormons believed that, the founders were now rebaptized and became Mormon and this kind of stuff in the afterlife, and that God favored them and gave them these spiritual doctrines that turned out to be the United States, Constitution and everything else. I mean, sure, they were enlightened owning slaves, but whatever. This was the belief. So I started thinking, oh, well, I'm from America, so I'm somehow better. Then I go there, I'm like, dude, these Koreans are amazing. They're loving people. They're so kind. I enjoy going out with them when I'm teaching them English. And, it was just like an eye-opening experience that had me see how much more connected we are and how we're all human beings. And this whole notion of me versus you and us versus them, and they're the bad guys and we're the good guys, was just a bunch of propaganda. And so think about how influenced we are. There's people that hate each other because of which baseball team they like. Yep. There's people that hate each other because which neighborhood they grew up in. I mean, we see entire countries that have been at war for how long. And as a matter of fact, the original vision of the founding fathers in America were that we wouldn't get involved in wars in Europe because it had been only filled with war throughout history, and yet we still did. So we just watched that divisiveness has been something that has gained power for some, and for whatever reason, people like Napoleon wanted to conquer and have more things. That influences so many people, and fear is one of the major influences that leads us astray.
It's powerful, man.
So that's a long answer to a short question.
What was the question? I can't even remember anymore.
It was really a monologue on the power of influence.
He asked if I'd ever been to Italy, is what I recall. That's how I heard that question. So Caleb,
actually,
you turn this on the table on us and you start asking us a bunch of questions. But
I was just about to do the same thing to him.
What do you do for self-awareness, and what do you do for self-love?
Yeah. Number one, I really, really try to get clear on. Well, I'll take a step back. I think about my death a lot. Not from a morbid, like I'm afraid to die. It's like, oh, when I'm dead, what really mattered? My legacy, quite frankly, doesn't really even matter because we don't even remember some amazing people in history. Mm-hmm. So what is going to be the ripple effect that moves on? And there was one thing that I kind of thought of as like one of the most powerful things that we can do is actually make a video for our funeral, which again sounds weird, but it gets us thinking today, what would I say at the most vulnerable / receptive moment of potentially my legacy? And it's interesting when you do that, it comes down to relationships, it comes down to where I'm spending my time, why in the world am I worrying? And it really purifies like why I do, and whenever I'm afraid or whenever I'm prideful or whatever I'm like trying to get greed, I'm like I'm gonna be dead and I'm gonna be naked before I know it. And so that's kind of what I do to try to like get me really focused on what matters, and it's been something that has worked for me and helped me give perspective.
Cool.
Now, is that something that
Garrett wanted to make jokes, but he's like, all right, I probably shouldn't.
No, it's actually that I filmed the video that's 13 minutes that is the beginning of my estate plan. So there's a link.
Yeah.
And so it's the preamble, and it's like just a video of like what we stand for as a Gunderson family. And it's more of like, hey, I want you to choose your own path and find what speaks to you. But love is really this binding thing. And if we could, even when COVID hit, I sat down with my kids. I'm like, hey, I just want to let you know, like there's a lot of fear going on right now, but I just want to let you know, no matter what your belief is, and no matter what happens through all this, there's nothing you could do that would make me love you less.
Wow.
And they're like, no, that's not true. We could behave better. I'm like, no, you could disappoint me.
What
that's
about
different.
Roman's new haircut?
Oh my gosh. It's so ridiculous. My wife says some hurtful shit.
So let me ask you a question. Yeah. So like, I love the concept, you know, I agree, not morbid, but I love the concept of thinking of like, what would I say at my own funeral? So let's make that tangible for some people, because that would be a hard concept. Like I'm trying to wrap my mind around and think about what I would say.
Yep.
So let's make that a little tangible since you've put some thought into this.
Yep.
I would say you should have worn more sunscreen with your white skin.
Well, like those are just life lessons, not legacy. So what would you say?
I lead with gratitude, because that's just like who I am. Like I'm so grateful to be here. Like when I first got into space, like Garrett was the guy, and I'm here, so I'm like grateful.
This was as hurtful.
we all
10 books ago,
hurtful just now.
10 books ago, Yeah,
Caleb just made his move, by the way.
Checkmate.
But so I always lead with gratitude, and then I'm a big purpose person, so it's just like, okay, what is the meaning to life? That could be a whole other podcast or whatnot, but it's like, what is the whole goal, you know? And so it's usually gratitude, and I think majority of people, like, if you're not happy, be more grateful, because you will become more happier. It's like what Amy Cuddy said on like TED Talk, where she's like, if you smile, if you like stand up straight or whatnot, you're gonna like, that's gonna translate. Same thing happens with gratitude. And then I'm just a big like, then it's like, you have one life. You have one life. Why in the world would you not go for it? And so my whole thing is like, some people have.
You only get one shot. Do not miss your chance to blow.
Right,
This
unless
opportunity
you
comes
have
once in a lifetime.
Unless you're Corey 30 shots later on the basketball hoop. It's like, I'm like, Corey, I didn't know you could be this bad at basketball. Like,
He hurt his back.
I threw my back
He
out.
hurt his back.
There was more problems than just his back with that.
You're 26 and you almost hurt your back sitting there because you did a workout.
But it's very interesting. So what I would say at my funeral, and this I have made this, is number one, I'm super grateful for my family, April, my wife, and just everyone that's helped me get to where I am. Like, super, super grateful. It is a miracle that I'm actually alive. If you actually think about statistics, like, think about that for a second. Amazing. And then it's at the end of the day, like, the fact that we do live in America, I've never like been on the street, you know, and it's like, there's perspective
Corey's
there.
not able to say that in his funeral.
I'm getting myself so in trouble because I'm like trying to be authentic, and I'm like, everything. I'm just like, Garrett's over there like thinking, how can I take this serious moment and make it all about me? No, but yeah, I mean, I guess I would ask you, like, how. I mean, obviously you would want to make people laugh.
Definitely.
And it would just think about the kind of jokes that you could say when you're dead.
It's true.
It's hard to be canceled.
Did you? Yeah. Norm Macdonald's new special. That guy rarely said anything that was ever controversial. And in his one where he's like, "I'm dying, so here's what you get."
Yeah.
But it is nice to live in the present and understand what each moment is, and really to have those conversations of what you'd have on that video along the way.
The other thing that I'll say, and this is a question I ask everybody that I get to interview, is if this was your last day on earth and you couldn't give them any book, any podcast, any keynote speech, but you had one conversation with the people that you love the most, what would you say? I can't tell you how many times people like take a step back and like tear up because they would say things like, "You're loved. I'm proud of you. Like, why in the world would you let other people and other influences determine why you do what you do?" Like, it's just, so it's purifying.
So it's an interesting idea that, you know, I think in terms of the message that you would deliver in your funeral is probably not too far off from mine in a lot of ways. And when you ask that question in an interview, it's where most people go. But in the practicality of the day-to-day, people don't live that way. They don't think that way. So it's really interesting that we would wait until our final moment to depart the knowledge that we know today, but choose not to live.
That's the secret of making the video, is you will be a better human being while you're alive for that same reason.
So make that video now.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
So now when we talk to you, like, you got to make the video. That'll be your thing. And you'll say, "It's interesting." Those are your comments now.
Those are my words.
Yeah.
100%.
26. I'm 26.
Italy, book.
I'll be along.
So let me ask you
longer
this.
than you.
You know, it's a long time ago, Garrett.
Yeah.
But at your 26-year-old self, knowing what you know now, what's one piece of advice you'd give yourself?
Well, I'd say don't overextend yourself doing a bunch of things that mean nothing, take you away from all your joy and everything that matters in the name of trying to prove everything out.
Yep.
I got 26 I was close to, it was a year away from, or maybe 2 years away from the inflection point of where now I had way too much real estate, had overextended myself with the number of things I was involved with in business. Carrie was telling me, I just go everywhere alone. It's just me, and like, I'm a single mom. I take the kids. I go to the stuff. You're working. You're gone. You're chasing all of this. And at that point, I was like, well, if I don't do this now because I've got myself in such a deep hole with leverage, then we're going to have to declare bankruptcy. He's like, well, if that's what we have to do to be a family, then that's what we have to do. And to my credit, at one time, we're having this conversation. She's like, what if all this doesn't work out? I was like, well, as long as we're not too prideful, it's not going to be a problem, because your parents would take us in, my parents would take us in, people would help out, but people, a lot of times in certain positions, when they've had certain amount of success, they're afraid to ask for support. They're afraid to say what's really going on. They spend so much time pretending everything's okay, and they don't know how to receive that support. And just knowing even when you're in good times, what is it that you could ask for? And by asking for that, people make those connections and you build new relationship capital. And when people serve you, it actually creates value for them as it creates value for you, because there's a certain exchange, whether that's a money exchange, whether that's a energy exchange. And so I'd still need to, 10 years from now, I'll come back and tell myself to worry less. I still worry more than is required.
Do you think your 26-year-old self would have listened and accepted such a long-winded answer?
Oh, thank you.
The lion. This should be called the lion's den. Really. Garrett kind of looks like a lion too, with his mane.
But that's okay. So that's like a really interesting. Like, I love that question. So if you could tell your 26-year-old self, what would you tell yourself?
Well, I'll just, if I could tell my 18-year-old self, I cared way too much about what people thought of me, and I was afraid. Going back to what you're saying, I was afraid of failing. Even though my crappy little self-published book was a thing,
I didn't say it was crappy.
The book's not crappy, just the cover. Come on.
But in all reality, I had this fear, and you can relate to this. It's like, oh, I wrote about money, and if I don't make it, or if I fail, man, that pierces, But then I looked myself in the mirror, and I was like, am I going to let fear, the underlying fear of thinking about what my parents or my friends would think about me, when in reality they're not thinking about me, they're thinking about themselves.
Yeah.
Am I going to let that rule my life? Yeah. And that was a really I'm at a place right now that if we lose everything at Better Wealth, everything, I genuinely would be okay. And I because my identity is not in the company. It would be hard. Yeah. But how freeing that is to say, listen, I'm motivated to make money, to serve people and all of that. But at the end of the day, this could all wash away, and we I will be fine. That is one of the most freeing things. And I would have told my 18-year-old self that, because I worried so much about what people thought. I didn't go to certain things. I didn't go to certain networking events. I didn't ask people certain things because I was afraid of what they thought of me. And it sucked.
That's really insightful. Yep. You're wise for your age. That's really insightful.
What would you say?
I read Garrett's books. That's why I have all this wisdom.
No, I would go back, and honestly, I would tell myself to give me more grace. Yeah. To be less hard. Not everything is life or death. And just the severity with which I handled, in hindsight, so many seemingly insignificant things. I just put so much pressure on myself. There was no joy. There was so much stress, and I would just say, let go of it. Give yourself some grace. Trust and flow. An observation I'm making is we're all talking about certain themes of identity. Because you would give yourself more grace because your grace didn't come from within. It's powerful. Yeah. Sorry that I'm so serious.
I like how you're on our show and interviewing us.
It's 26. He has something to prove.
What are your notes over here?
I mean, how much time do we have?
Let's hear.
It's interesting. And the first thing is, I wrote down the word identity.
It's interesting. I'm surprised. Are you surprised that's interesting?
But you had an amazing rant the other day about investor DNA. We had someone at the cabin, and this is an amazing individual. So gifted, super connected, and yet he was talking to us about investing in some real estate deal that he shouldn't have touched with a 10-foot pole. It was clear to you and me. You went on this beautiful rant about investor DNA, and it was very beautiful. It was actually captured. I'm wondering if you can give just a summary, because I'm hearing a lot of people out there that are talking about investing, and it's so clear to me they're asking the wrong question, and you are articulate it very well.
I hear Corey saying summary in my head. Summary, not sermon. Summary. So this is knowing your win has so much to do with investing. If you don't know your win, more is the answer. So in investing, more means I'll just invest into more things. Maybe it's oil and gas. Maybe it's more stocks. Maybe it's going to be some tax liens. Maybe it's whatever comes up that you can allocate money to, because it's simply about growth. And sometimes that growth skips all of the personal growth that you would have because you're just handing it over, hoping for the best. Somewhere along the way, we're indoctrinated to believe that investing was handing our money to someone else, and that investment had nothing to do with who we were, what our knowledge was, and all the outcome was predicated upon are the people that we gave the money to smart? Right. Did the market cooperate, and did we have the timing right? And so that has actually created a world of speculation and gambling disguised as investing. And so my definition of investing is, am I a good investor in the things I'm investing in? So investments could be a video course. It could be the filming that we're doing here today. It could be time with the relationship that I'm investing. When we say spend, I want to spend time with you. Let's not spend time. Let's invest time. Investing time is with the quality relationship. Spending time is with the people who don't want to see you do well and want to drag you down or in the wrong spot. So in investing, what if it's partially part of your win is developing mental capital? What are the skill sets you want to increase, that you want to tap into, that you want to unlock? Then it's relationship capital. Who could you get to know better and, again, learn from and even add value to? What if that value is more than just the money that you allocate? Now we're more related to those investments. So intellectual property could become an investment instead of just real property. And the people that do the best with real property, like real estate, bring intellectual property that enhances the value of the real estate because of the knowledge that they have. So investing first is investing in ourselves before we invest in other people's companies. If we don't know what our dream is, we don't have a life that we want to live, and instead we take our money and add that to something that we know nothing about in hopes that 30 years from today it's going to pay off. We don't know what's going to happen the next 30 years, but if that entire premise is, I hope it pays off in the long haul, it's going to be a haul of a life. So investing becomes more relationship oriented to ourselves, and it begins with the therapy that we're talking about. That's an investment in yourself. It's the coaches that we have in our life and the coaches that I have, from performance to comedy. I look at those as investments, and a lot of people don't see those as investments because they see them as expenses, because that's how it shows up on your income statement. You're paying a person. But if that person brings more out of you, enhances your skill set, enhances your quality of life, that's investing. So I have zero money in the stock market, but I own stocks because they're private stocks that I'm an owner in because I'm part of the company. I own an intellectual property company. It's surprising how much that intellectual property is out there that I'm not even getting paid for, that you're bringing to my attention and riling me up, But at the same time,
no idea what you were doing.
It's somewhat flattering.
Corey and I made eye
hand.
contact last night. He's like, don't worry about this.
But then I realized I had a bout of scarcity just to get over it. Whatever, it's flattering. But that's the difference of me living in my win, is that I'm related to the investments, but we're told that we don't have time. And because our relationship to time is linear and we're told time is money, we think all our time has to be spent making money, and that we hand and shirk our money and abdicate responsibility to earn money on the money. And we think that passiveness of that investing is going to pay off. But what it does is that money passes us by. Sermon more than summary, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my summary of this is get really, really clear on what intentional living looks like for you. What are the results under what intentional living looks like? And everything that you do with your time, money, resources, relationships should back that up.
Know your win relates to your investing.
And stay in your value of center. Like what you know, stick with that. Going outside of that, that's gambling.
But it's funny, we need to give people permission to do that, because if not, if you don't have that framework, then you're like, more is better.
You know what their framework came from? Here's where the framework that I adopted came from. Who's played the game of life? It's maybe a little bit earlier than your time. But
I'm sure there was an app of it that he played.
Yeah, there's one strategy to win that game. College education. You get your college education, and then everything is better after that. So that's the message. You've got to get a college education, which in some ways you're educated, in other ways you're indoctrinated.
Yep.
And that indoctrination is higher education, and the higher you go, the more credibility you have, the more power, and the more prestige, and the more wage.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up the game of life, because also look at Monopoly.
That's the second one. Yeah.
How do you win Monopoly?
By destroying your
Destroying
competition.
your competition and taking all of their profit.
Win, lose. The whole game is win, lose. And that's how people play the game of investing. It's not personal. It's business. That's code word for I'm going to fuck you. And I don't care. Because it's business, because that's what Monopoly taught me, and that's what business taught me, and that's calloused without a pulse, but yeah.
So can I play devil's advocate? Or
Yeah.
Well, it's just let me finish this note. So when you identify your investor DNA and you stay within that game, you're taking control and accepting responsibility for your life. When you're not doing that and you're handing your future over to somebody else, you're letting go of all that responsibility.
devil's advocate. It sounds wooey and it sounds impossible to measure. And it sounds like we could manipulate people because we're like, invest in yourself. And
Okay, so
so you
let's
can measure rate of return.
Let's break it down.
Let's measure it. I don't know if you know, I wrote a book, but it's called Killing Sacred Cows. And it was a $500,000 investment, which at the time in my life was a substantial investment.
Yeah.
I had to learn, I had to have editors.
Yeah.
I had to have a ghostwriter. I had designers. I had distributors and marketers and book promoters and PR firm. I had this collaboration that taught me how to turn that content into an investment that improved people's lives. And this year alone, you know, here we are. I wrote that book. It came out with the published version August of 2008. We're now in 2022.
Right.
And I'm still getting paid cash flow from that book. That is an investment.
Right.
It's intellectual property. And that investment brought new mental capital because it brought absolutely an immense amount of skills. I hired this guy, Dean Ropart. He showed me how to write an article that ended up getting me on a huge news cycle with ABC's Good Money and CNN and all these places because of that relationship capital that came from the book. I met people that transformed my life and marriage and showed me to put quality of life at the forefront because they became fans of the book, reached out to me, and we connected. That's an investment. But we think investments need to be buttoned up as a mutual fund. It's synonymous, just like Kleenex and tissue. One's a name brand, another's describing what that is. Right. Stocks and investing became synonymous, like they're the same thing.
Right.
But the thing is, it's not really investing. It's a secondary market that's based and predicated upon gambling because ultimately it's a supply and demand thing where the most knowledgeable people own hedge funds and the least knowledgeable people get in mutual funds. And one make the majority of the money, the others make the least. It's 84% of the market is made by 10% of the investors as far as the returns. And so when we think that that's what to do and then say to invest in yourself, well, that seems woo. Well, then why do people go to college? They think that's an investment in themselves. Right. Why would people read a book or listen to this? It's an investment in themselves. Why would people go to therapy? It's an investment in themselves. Why would people do almost anything? When I go anywhere, I'm like, oh, this is a really cool theme park. That's someone's investment. Yeah. This is a great restaurant. It's someone's investment.
I love that you brought up the education play because at the end of the day, it is indoctrinated that you, like, every parent wants their kid to go to school, right? If possible. And then, but if you look at the structure of that now, one, jobs are harder to find. Student debt is out of control. Out of control.
My comedy on student loan debt's awesome.
Yeah, right? Like they spend the vast
just
majority.
in a very humble way.
Yeah, that was like the most Garrett quote.
Very like.
Hold on. Was that about you?
Humble brag.
Shocked. But again, like that is like I love that example because that is and when you say, you're absolutely right. When you say invest in yourself, it sounds woo. But here's the thing. Everyone has an idea inside of them.
Yep.
But what's holding them back is fear.
Right.
And so instead of taking that chance on yourself, then I'm going to put that responsibility on somebody else to do it.
I'm not as good.
Me.
I'm not as smart. I'm not as capable. I'm not as degreed. I'm not as experienced. Not. Can't. Part of the vernacular, part of the indoctrination, part of the hierarchy. And And how many people, my friend Woody Woodward wrote a book called Millionaire Dropouts. I needed a series around this where he would just take who didn't go through high school that had a major impact on the world. And it's insane how many people. And yet I met people that dropped out in 6th grade, became multimillionaires, and they're still reeling about not finishing school, and they still make an excuse for not being educated. I'm like, you're educated in a different way. And the divinity of diversity, the fact that we're educated in different ways, what makes us exchange with one another.
Right.
If we all had the same knowledge and same abilities, it would be a very boring world. It'd be very bland. But the fact is that other people are interested in things I'm not. I'm interested in things that they're not, and I could bring value to them. They could bring value to me, and we can both end up wealthier based upon our strengths. And that's the backbone of an economy. And when we say, I don't know that I have strengths, I don't want to invest in myself, I'm just going to invest all my time to earn a wage, and I'm going to set it aside with someone else that I don't really know and hope for the best 30 years from now, it only fails 95% of the time. That's all. Only 95% of the time.
But even 5%, what's a win? Is it not running out of money?
Here's the 5% that wins. I had a junior high basketball coach, Coach Dupin, and he had tiny home before tiny homes were popular, and he walked everywhere and didn't drive his vehicle, and he seemed like a pretty happy guy, and he was really frugal and put all of his money in mutual funds, and he was your millionaire next door. Okay, that's fine, but most of what you don't read about in the millionaire next door is they need to have the millionaire next door's kids. And they need to write a book about what happens to the kids of the millionaire next door, because I'm telling you, it's horrific. They don't talk money. They don't know their family has money. And then all of a sudden, when their family dies, they inherit all of this, and they blow it quickly because they have no investor DNA, no concept of money intelligence, and they simply get handed something like they just won the lottery, and they end up losing at life because they didn't learn how to be stewards of the money. When we develop ourselves, we learn how to be stewards of what we have, and we can grow that. And when it's consistent and congruent with who we are, we bring joy, fulfillment, and the essence of value creation comes forward. When we're afraid and we just trade our time for money, the brilliance that we could bring to the world dies with us in the graveyard, and the world never experiences it. I think we have all the mental and relationship capital in the world to solve the majority of the problems that we have. They don't get solved because we think financial capital is going to solve it, but financial capital is only a measure of our mental and relationship capital and the effectiveness to use those two things. And when we just print money, we demolish and diminish what those mental and relationship capital values truly are, because then we're saying you don't have to exchange to create wealth. You just have to be lucky, or you just have to have your government save you, and ultimately we lose sight of what matters most, which is human connection, value creation, and knowing our win and loving our life. Hope you enjoyed What's Your Win. For me, it's discovery on a daily basis, getting more clear about what to remove from my life, what to embrace, and define the rules of the game from my perspective. I want you to do that in your own life. So dive into yet another episode so you can get clear about your win, remove the obstacles and distractions, and have a better life and win before you begin.